Sophie, as we were talking earlier, as you were talking about your own purpose and you use the word respect, and there are situations, we all are in, and typically we end up finding ourselves in misalignment with the purpose of the organization we are part of. So how has these situations, played in your life?
There was one organisation I have found that I've chosen well, or I've been chosen well, if you like, when I've worked in different organisations. I've pretty much most of my career worked in the not-for-profit sector, both in the UK and Australia. And there's only really been one scenario where my values and beliefs and my purpose didn't align so much with the organisation. Certainly on paper, it did. And but I think we've all sadly probably worked in that one environment, hopefully no more, where a toxic culture exists. And for me, that didn't last for more than a few months before I needed to get out of that environment. And it's very easy to have something written on paper that this is a values-driven organisation, and this is how we will respond to our people, but also our clients. But when that doesn't happen, for me, sort of integrity is everything, and having that questioned or not being able to trust your colleagues is it's not a space to work in for me.
Okay. And as you talked about that specific purpose story, and you work in various sectors right now as an organization, you touch disability a bit, you touch alcohol and alcohol and drugs. In those sectors, so there is a sectoral purpose, overarching, a sector is the reason why they exist, and there's a funding around. And how is the alignment happening between your individual organizational purpose and how they are evolving versus the sector?
I think because we are in a very niche area, so I don't want to turn this into a whinge fest, but what I would say is, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is a disorder that can only be caused through alcohol exposure during pregnancy. And because of that, it's often so stigmatized, it's misjudged, it's misdiagnosed, and or a missed diagnosis. And I think because of that, whilst anybody who's involved in the sector and has started to understand about FASD, it's so incredibly obvious as to why there needs to be far more support and awareness and education in this area. But because the stigma is there, it's really hard to get each area to want to embrace it and want to move forward with the necessary supports that are needed. I mean, for me personally, I worked in, as I said before, the justice sector, the AOD sector, homelessness sector, and would have come across many individuals who'd been impacted by alcohol in utero and were living with the behavioural symptoms and challenges of their brain-based disability. And yet I wouldn't have known that at the time necessarily, because they wouldn't have had a diagnosis. So they would have been making choices and decisions without actually being able to choose, if that makes sense, if that's even possible, because of the fact that their judgment was impaired, or they didn't understand the consequences of their behaviour, or the impulse control that they struggle with. And it wasn't really probably until I joined NOFASD in 2017 that I became aware of how just low levels of alcohol can have such a significant impact. And as an organisation, as a grassroots organisation, we have been lobbying and advocating for more than 20 years to really get FASD on the agenda. We're talking about 2 Senate inquiries, multiple submissions to different inquiries. But at this point, it's still a topic that is so stigmatised, and once you open that can of worms, the reality is that there's potentially a lot of funding that needs to go into this area to help reduce incidence.